And now, here is your pandemic news report.
Welcome to This Explainer. Right off the bat, we're diving into a highly scrutinized timeline of emails from early 2020. We're going to impartially break down some pretty severe accusations exactly as they're laid out in our three main sources: articles from Natural News, The Federalist, and the raw email leaks themselves. The goal here isn't to take a side. Instead, we're just unpacking the claims, the timelines, and the exact data these authors are using to build their case against Dr. Anthony Fauci. Let's make this incredibly easy to understand. Here's a quick look at our agenda for mapping all this out. We've got 1, the accusations, 2, unpacking the science, 3, the midnight emails, 4, the conference call, 5, the 180-degree flip, and finally, 6, calls for accountability. Let's jump in. Section 1, the accusations. Okay, to really get where these authors are coming from, we have to look at their baseline claims. And honestly, they are broad and they are extreme. Take our first source, Natural News. They use highly partisan, really inflammatory language, outright accusing Dr. Fauci of actively creating the crisis. They even go as far as labeling him a mass murderer, claiming he staged a massive cover-up and pushed policies that were literally contrary to the best medical science. So they're framing him not as a public health official, but as the primary driver of the pandemic. A huge pillar of this argument is the claim that early, effective treatments were intentionally suppressed. The source argues that Dr. Fauci purposely blocked alternative treatments from a specific list of doctors. We're talking about folks like Dr. Zelenko, Dr. Didier Raoult, and the FLCCC doctors. According to the authors, these doctors were out there successfully treating actual patients, but their methods were supposedly buried by Dr. Fauci. Why? Well, they claim it was to clear the way for pushing poorly tested and highly profitable vaccines. That really sets the stage for the intense distrust these sources have. Moving on to Section 2, unpacking the science. Before we get into the actual email timeline from the Federalist, we need to define a couple of complex scientific terms in layman's terms. You really have to grasp these to understand why the authors find these emails so alarming. First up, gain-of-function research. In the simplest terms, this means taking a pathogen and artificially manipulating it in a lab to give it a new function. Usually that means making it more potent, more infectious, or deadlier to humans. Scientists do this to study how a virus might naturally mutate, but as our sources are quick to point out, it is incredibly risky. And because it's so dangerous, it requires intense oversight. That brings us to the P3 framework. Think of the P3 framework as the ultimate, non-negotiable safety checklist. It's a strict set of high-security lab rules that this kind of dangerous pathogen research must legally pass through to make sure a lab leak doesn't happen. Keeping these two concepts in mind is absolutely crucial for what happens next. Section 3, the midnight emails. So let's look at how this all builds into a crazy 13-hour window between January 31st and February 1st, 2020. The Federalist charts this rapid-fire succession of late-night communications, all revolving around a Wuhan Institute of Virology paper by Dr. Ralph Baric and Dr. Zhengli Li Shi, who is often known as the Batwoman. The sources argue that within this super tight 13-hour window, Dr. Fauci realized three massive things. The virus looked engineered. American taxpayers had actually funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan, and that research allegedly bypassed the P3 safety framework. The catalyst for this whole controversy? A private 10:32 p.m. warning from British researcher Dr. Christian Anderson. Dr. Anderson, who, by the way, had received millions in NIH grants, emailed Dr. Fauci to say the virus's genome was inconsistent with evolutionary theory. Put simply, he was telling the nation's top infectious disease expert that COVID-19 didn't look natural at all. It looked like it was built in a lab. Now, check out this stark contrast in how Dr. Fauci communicated after getting that warning. At 12:29 a.m., he fires off an urgent email to his deputy, Dr. Auchincloss, attaching the Wuhan paper and saying, "You will have tasks today that must be done." But then, just over 2 hours later, he emails his boss, the Trump-appointed Assistant Secretary for Preparedness, with a totally different, super calm tone. He attaches an article downplaying a lab leak and casually says it gives a balanced view. The author suggests that this was a deliberate choice, a calculated move to hide the alarming Wuhan paper from his own superiors. The plot definitely thickens the next morning. At 11:47 a.m., Dr. Fauci's deputy replies, and he confirms the author's worst allegations. Taxpayer-funded research in Wuhan allegedly bypassed the required safety oversight. He flat out states they were sure that no coronavirus work has gone through the P3 framework. For the sources, This is the exact moment Dr. Fauci realizes dangerous US-funded research was done without proper safety checks, right in the city where a potentially engineered virus just broke out. Section 4, the conference call. This clinical trail of data leads us straight to a heavily redacted emergency conference call on the evening of February 1st, right after those alarming morning emails. The guest list here super divided. On one hand, you have Dr. Fauci, Dr. Anderson, and 10 other international virologists, almost all of whom got U.S. taxpayer-funded grants from Fauci. But totally excluded from the call, top U.S. government officials, including the head of the CDC and Fauci's actual boss at HHS. And the authors of our source material ask the obvious question: why withhold critical information about an engineered virus from high-ranking officials during an emerging global crisis? If the nation's top scientists were privately panicking about a lab leak, why not tell the highest levels of the U.S. pandemic response team? The sources argue this was a strategy to manage the narrative rather than actually disclose the truth. Section 5, the 180-degree flip. So, what happened right after this unrecorded, heavily redacted conference call? Well, the sources point to a total 180-degree narrative flip by Dr. Anderson in just 4 days. Remember, on January 31st, he privately warned Fauci the virus looked engineered. But by February 5th, literally days after the conference call, he goes public, saying theories about the virus being engineered are demonstrably false. The authors strongly imply this rapid reversal wasn't a coincidence. It was orchestrated during that February 1st call. The Federalist breaks this down into a three-step sequence, suggesting a coordinated effort to manufacture a definitive source that would permanently kill the lab leak theory. First, virologists from that private call write an influential article in Nature Medicine claiming a natural origin. Second, emails show Dr. Fauci was allegedly allowed to edit this article before publication. And finally, step 3, Dr. Fauci stands at a White House press briefing and cites that exact same article as independent proof that the virus came from nature. It's presented as a complete, closed-loop cover-up. Section 6 calls for accountability. Finally, let's look at the conclusions and demands these publications make after laying out this whole case file. The reactions really run the gamut. On the extreme end, Natural News is demanding immediate criminal indictments, trials, and severe punishment. The Federalist leans more into political accountability, demanding answers for why Dr. Fauci has refused to testify about these specific events. But across the board, everybody is demanding total transparency regarding the heavy government redactions in these emails and a full, unrestricted congressional investigation into what was actually known in early 2020. Which leaves us with a final, pressing question from our sources. With millions of lives impacted globally, will the complete case file of the pandemic's origins and the unredacted truth behind these midnight emails ever be fully open for the public to see? The authors argue it's absolutely vital for public trust moving forward. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions.
And now, here is your pandemic news report.